What is going on, everyone? Farrell here, coming to you live with another Farrellism podcast. Just bear with us for a minute while we get our guest star. Thank you so much for the technical difficulty patience and perfect timing. So,
Boom.
how you doing, Nick?
I'm good. I'm good. We got it's a weird morning with Instagram and with the weather, but
I know it's like
it's one of
Instagram's
those
usually
days.
good, and now it's not. And my state on the East Coast should be cold and it's hot. Yours should be hot and it's cold. So what are we gonna do? But anyway, guys. So Farrell here, coming to you live with another Farrellism podcast, and today we touch on the intricacies of codependency and navigating through dating during these difficult times with special guest star, the comeback journey, aka Mr. Nick.
We're here. I'm ready for it. I'm excited for
Awesome.
this, man.
Oh, yeah, me too. So before we get started, so for those that are wondering where you can find us, for me, you can find me on Facebook at Farrellism and on YouTube at Farrellism, and now on Instagram at Farrellism15. And I'm also now on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, anywhere you can find podcasts. And it is Farrellism as well over there. So when we're done here, this will be uploaded on all platforms, including that. Before we get started, Nick, where can people find you?
So Instagram is at _ the comeback journey, Facebook and YouTube and TikTok, though I'm not really on TikTok that much, but that's all just search the comeback journey. And then I have a website, thecomebackjourney.com. And also podcasts, any streaming platform. You can find my podcast, but you can also find that through the website, and you can like scroll through and see episode descriptions and all that. So yeah.
Perfect. So let's get started. So let's start with codependency. I feel like that's one of those topics that's a little weird to talk about, either because it just sounds like it would be weird, or people themselves may feel weird talking about it. What do you think, Nick? What's your experience in hearing the topic of codependency and how people feel? Do you feel it's a weird topic, or?
I think it's largely associated with shame, and so people avoid it, avoid the topic, avoid talking about it. There's there's this sense that, at least in my experience, if you are codependent, then there's something wrong with you. And I don't think that's the case. I think that everyone has struggles and issues that they deal with, and that just this is just another one of those. And it's a lot more common than people think. And so I'm happy that we're able to talk about it on a platform like this and kind of shed some light on it, take away a little bit of the stigma, and just let people know that it's okay if you are codependent, and that there are ways to work through it.
Yeah, no, I agree. And one of, you'll hear from me. I'm one of the first people to say that I'm not afraid to admit when I have something I need to work on. And as we get through this, I'll gladly chime in. I mean, I will tell you right now, personally, I feel like I am fighting through codependency. And sometimes it's one of those things like anxiety that it's out of your control. But the biggest thing you can understand is that it's okay to ask for help. It's okay to feel pain. It's okay to feel like something's wrong, because if you can't feel it and you can't allow yourself to acknowledge what's going on, then how can you even fix it? Like, for example, take an analogy of a car. You jump in a car and you notice your check engine light's on, but you don't want to acknowledge it. If you don't acknowledge that the check engine light's on, then how can you take it to a mechanic and want to repair it if you won't even acknowledge that there's a problem? And then what happens is something worse happens, and then you're in a worse situation than if you would have just gone and get the check engine light. So think of each of us as a car, and this codependency is just a light on that we need to fix. And if we don't take ourselves through the appropriate channels to get mechanically fixed, how can we be in perfect harmony and working order?
I 100% agree with that. I think that these these issues that people go through, like you also mentioned, anxiety, codependency, addiction, depression, all of these things, I tend to look at them as alarms, going off, or like a check engine light letting you know, like your body, your mind, is your soul is letting you know that there's something wrong, something needs your attention. And if we ignore that, it doesn't go away. Like these things don't go away on their own. They have to be, and and largely, at least for me, like I'm a big fan of avoidance. It's like my past, like avoiding things. And the problem with that is if we try to avoid something that we're going through, some some issue we're dealing with, some feelings that we don't want to deal with, we're denying part of our existence. And when we do that, we're not being honest with ourselves, we're not being authentic, and we're engaging in these cycles of self betrayal. And that just, when you get in this recurring cycle of self betrayal, it's like you're digging yourself a hole day in and day out. And the more you do it, the harder it is to get out of it.
Yeah, and think of it like this. It's like a shadow, because this is how I refer to anxiety, and I think codependency is the same thing. It's like a shadow looming over you, and it comes and goes, but until you confront it, it's always going to be there. And one of the things I believe in, I always like comparing something serious like this to some movie or some way there's a connect, because I believe movies are doorways and pathways that you can see what's really there. And here's a perfect example of where this plays in. There's a movie that came out even during what's going on. It's called The New Mutants. It was delayed for so long. I don't know if you saw it,
I did not.
but are you familiar with like the X-Men universe kind of thing?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So it takes place in there, and it's about these group of mutants that are being held in a hospital. They claim they're helping them get better, and they're working through things. So one of the girls that shows up there, she's orphaned because her family was destroyed in what was called a tornado, like a storm. And then since they've been there, all the other mutants were experiencing their fears, but kind of like fears like in a horror movie that are actually real, trying to hurt you. And it wasn't until
Mm.
towards the end of the movie that the girl who got sent there, who got orphaned, was the cause of everything. Like her power was she had this fear that she could control, and she could latch on to other people's fears, and it would try to hurt them, and they wouldn't be able to fight their own fears. The only way to stop it was for her to face her fear, to be able to control her power. And her fear manifested itself into the shape of a bear, into the form of a bear, because that's what was around her necklace, and that was a sacred animal to her. And the bear was actually what killed the village, and she realized that. So it wasn't until the end that she stood in front of the bear, and it was huge, until she faced it and said, "Hey, listen, I know what you are, and I'm not afraid." And as she kept coming to that self-actualization and that self-realization, the bear got smaller to the point where she could control it and own it, and realize that she can control her own powers once she overcame her own demons and her own bear. And so I think that was just something very memorable to compare this to, because this is like our own demons that we have to own. Until we can confront our own demons, we will never be able to set ourselves free.
I 100% agree. First of all, I want to watch that movie now. uh, yeah, it's interesting because we it's basically like a law of the universe that we recreate, or day by day create the life that we feel we're worthy of. And whatever, like you said in this example, her fear was causing her to hinder her control of her powers. And I would say, like you tied this in with anxiety. Like I think that's I think that's true. It If we are afraid to face whatever is going on internally, we hinder our ability to step into our most authentic version of ourselves. And there's nothing wrong with the fear. Like I think fear can be healthy. You know, if there's something you're afraid of and like you feel like you're avoiding it, I think I try to take that as a sign that I should do that thing ASAP. And
Yeah.
I don't always fall through with that, you know, because I'm a human, but I
Yeah, we're
try
all
to
human.
think of it that way, you know, and if like I'm not saying like I'm afraid of um like a gang war, so I'm gonna go like run into somebody's turf and like stand in the middle of the street. Like that's not the kind of fear I'm talking about. I'm talking about like I was afraid of skydiving, and so I went skydiving, and it was awesome, you know. And it's only that fear only has power over us if we let it have the power over us.
Yeah, no, I agree. Talking about a fear, I used to be, believe it or not, this is going to sound so ironic. It's so ironic, but in high school, I was afraid of public speaking. I was afraid of doing what we're doing right now. And then one day, my friends, and maybe some of them are watching right now, they're like, hey, Farrell, why don't you go up on
Who's
stage for our talent show? And why don't you do something? And I was like, I never thought about that. So maybe I will. So I got up on stage. I even had people from my old high school coming to cheer me on, and I rapped. And broke the ice, and ever since then, I nailed it in my public speaking school class in college, and then here we are with these podcasts, and it's just like if you don't know something, you'll never know until you try it, and it's fear of something you're just gonna get in your head, like learning how to swim or going on a roller coaster. It's not the actual thing; it's the fear that all these questions you ask yourself, and
the
the one
unknown?
the unknown, exactly, and your brain starts running on overdrive. And the biggest thing I will say too, codependency, anxiety, all this, it's not the actual issues that you're anxious or codependent with someone on. It's the actual act. So like the definition of what codependency is, or the anxiety itself, that's what's actually what you have to overcome and get through, not the actual, like let's say you're anxious about a test, or you're anxious about going on a first date. It's not the date or the test that you're anxious about. It's the idea of the anxiety, or the, if you're codependent, if you feel like you need to spend a lot of time with your significant other or your friends, it's not them, it's the act of it.
Hmm. That's an interesting way to think about it. I think there's definitely some truth to that. I never really thought about it that way. Um, and I think that so if you're saying like let's use anxiety for an example here. You're saying that like the anxiety like kicks into high gear because you recognize that you have anxiety, and so that thought comes into your head and it just replays over and over, and that's what builds it.
Yeah, so it's the easiest comparison, and you see this maybe on a TV show or movie or in real life. When someone keeps going after love, and they latch on to someone real quick, because I think this ties into love and codependency. Someone might say to them, "Oh, you're not really in love with this person. You're in love with the idea of being loved." So that is the same conceptual notion as what I'm saying here, is that you're not necessarily anxiety. You are anxious about this, but it's not that thing. It's your brain telling you it's that, but subconsciously it's really just the anxiety itself. Because think about it, when you overcome one, like let's say you pass a test, you no longer have anxiety about that, but then you now have anxiety about something else. So the anxiety itself is always spitting into a different direction, making you anxious about something. And then when you really break it down microscopically, it's not those things, because you get through them and you feel better. It's the actual anxiety or the actual codependency. So it's the mechanics that shoot into those things.
Mm. So there's this modality that I was introduced to a few months ago, and it's called shadow work. And essentially, like we have, like if you think of like yin and yang, like light, dark, order, chaos, um, and then like light and shadow. And for this concept of shadow work, there's this framework that I was introduced to where you can kind of identify and confront things that you feel would be beneficial to your life, maybe something you've been avoiding. And so you would like get a journal, write out and answer these questions and actually put them on paper. And so part of it is what feelings or emotions am I avoiding? What negative patterns am I noticing myself recreate in my day-to-day life? And one of these questions is, when you think about what you're avoiding, like I went through this process a few months ago about having a conversation with my dad, and it was about why, like, I'm 29, my parents divorced when I was like 11, and he and I had never talked about why he left, because they split up and then he moved from California to Illinois, and I hardly saw him for years, and he and I had never talked about it, and I was like I avoided it heavy. And so I went through this process, this shadow work, and one of the questions I asked myself was, what's the worst case scenario that my ego wants to protect me from? Like, what? Because in our heads we make up these, it's the unknown, right? So we spin these ideas like we don't, and they get blown out of proportion massively. And so when you write it out and you're like, what's the actual worst case scenario that can happen, and you write it out, 10 times out of 10 it's not going to be as bad as what you make it out to be in your head. And so when you just take a second and you stop and you sit and you analyze, I guess, for lack of a better word, you analyze what's going on, and you realize that you do actually have all the power to tackle whatever comes your way. We just get all up in our heads, and we essentially get in our own way, and
Yeah.
most of the time we don't even recognize it.
No, I agree, and it's the same thing like when you're waiting for a test. Two things I'm gonna throw into here that I think will really chime well. First one, I used to have this really awesome psychology professor, and he would always tell me, people get anxious about my tests, or people get anxious about college tests, when really it's not that bad. And the reason it's harmful to be, anxious about something like that is because when you're worried so much about studying for this test, you start to over adrenalize, which means it doesn't matter how much you study or how long you study, you're not retaining any of that information. But if you just sit there and tell yourself, okay, I have a test tomorrow. You know what? I'm going to go in there. I'm going to do the best I can. And whatever happens, happens. But I'm going to shoot for a good grade. And so when you go in with that notion, you start to retain the information and you come out on top. And I've used that technique and it really works. And so I would say that that's one. And then another thing, I learned this too over the years, is that one thing, we talked about this, especially since we're going to get into, the idea of dating, that, I struggle in the dating world and I get so over anxious about, I don't want to be alone. I don't want to be alone. And then I break it down in my head and I'm working through this and I tell myself, hey, listen, I'm 26. I don't have a girlfriend, but so what? I have a great life and I'm doing great things. It'll come in time. So once you accept yourself, like, because, it always seems like with anxiety or codependent, like you're trying to prove something, when really the people that you think you're trying to prove it to, you're not. You're just trying to prove it to yourself. You are your worst enemy sometimes, and you're hardest on yourself. So once you face yourself and you look in a mirror and you say, hey, listen, this is what's going on. I accept this, or I'm ready to face this, then it becomes easier.
I agree. That's a powerful message for people, because it once you realize that you have all the answers and you have the power to create or shape the way you live your life, and it's all internal. Once you adopt that mentality, all the doors open. The problem is we all have blind spots, and the point of a blind spot is that you can't see it. And
Yeah.
so if you can't see it, it's like the you don't know what you don't know type of thing. Like, the answer could be like right there, but you
Yeah.
can't see it. And
Yeah.
it's I think it's important that we touch on perspective and the way that we view day-to-day life. There's two, like, in the grand scheme of things, there's two ways to look at it, in my opinion. One is you go through life thinking that everything that happens is happening to you, or everything that happens is happening for you. And if you live in the this happens to me mentality, the victim mentality, you are going to live your life believing that it is dictated by externals, that other people, other places, other things have the power to influence the trajectory of your life. And while that's true to some extent, if you go through life on the flip side thinking that everything is happening for you, then you start to embody this belief of abundance and gratitude. And that's when you can start, like, little by little you start taking your power back, because you realize that whatever's happening, like, it's out of your control, and anything that does happen, it's just happening for you. It's happening to teach you something, to show you something, to guide you to the next step.
Yeah, it's the
And
embetterment. It's the embetterment. So like you mentioned the doors and the keys. It's like we have the keys in our pocket the whole time to open the doors and we don't realize it, or we're the
mhm,
authors of our own destiny. We just have to write it. And one thing that I will say too, and then I'll throw it back to you, a resolution that, like I just brought up, how I was trying to confront myself saying, "Hey, I'm 26 and I'm single, but that's okay," is that I always used to think, oh, yeah, it's never going well for me. It must be something with me, or it must be my confidence. There's got to be a reason I'm still single. And then I realized maybe all of it is a sign that I haven't met the right person yet. And instead of looking at it as a bad umbrella, like a bad cloud over my head all the time, it's more of a veil of protection for me so that one day I'll be put in the right place at the right time to meet that person. And so that goes for anything. It's like, instead of, that's a strategy in psychology too, in dealing with anxiety and coping with it, is that if you keep saying, "Oh yeah, this always happens to me," or "This always happens," this is like, that's negative thinking. The positive is like, "Hey, this happens, so what?" And hey, I accept these, or I believe. Like, look at the positive or the silver lining in something that it's so easy to say, "Hey, this," they go negative with it.
yeah, yeah. So there's two things I want to say. So one, about the dating thing. Are you familiar with the show How I Met Your Mother?
I know of it. I can't remember the last time I watched it though.
Okay. Okay, so there's this episode where, like, one of the main characters, he's constantly searching for love, for like his perfect partner, and he gets into this relationship with this woman, and it doesn't end up working out, and they're sitting in a car, you know, at, after the relationship is ended, they realize that it's not going to work out. And um the woman tells a story. She was like, I was driving one day and I got pulled over for speeding, and the cop walks up to the car window, and she rolls it down. She was like, "I'm so sorry, officer. I know you've been waiting. I tried to get here as fast as I could." And it's the same thing with, in my eyes, like with the dating thing. Like, your perfect companion, she's out there, and they're coming as fast as they can, right? But like,
Yeah,
there's only so
response time.
fast. Yeah, and so it's it's equal parts taking control and being patient,
Yeah,
and recognizing that there are some things that are out of your control, and trying to force something that's not meant to be probably won't end up well, but it will teach you what you don't want. And I think that the quickest way to figure out where you're supposed to be is to eliminate the places where you're not supposed to be. And so that's a big concept of dating, is to try and figure out what it is you want, what it is you don't want, and really internalize those things, and kind of sift through, I thought I liked this personality trait, but maybe I don't, and like, now I know that for sure because this isn't working. um it's a I think on the outside, like, when somebody tries to, and I'm guilty of this as well, I've definitely done this, is like, I try to pick and choose what parts I want to accept of somebody, and the parts that I don't want to accept or that don't resonate with me, I pretend like they don't exist, and I really only focus on the good parts. And I think that plays into the codependency, where like for like if you can't fully accept yourself, you can't fully accept somebody else. And so if you're only focusing on certain aspects of somebody else's personality because those are the ones that resonate with you, and then you largely ignore these massive red flags that are coming up, eventually you're going to find yourself in a situation that you don't want to be in. And I think that's an important part of the dating world, is to not get so hung up. As you mentioned earlier, it's not necessarily the person, it's the idea of it. And to not get hung up on the idea of what could be. There's two parts: the idea of what could be in that moment, because you, maybe this person's really attractive, or maybe they said something funny and you vibe like in the moment, but there's all these other things that you're ignoring. And the other thing is, maybe you see somebody's potential of like what could be in the future, but you can't live your life, and especially in a relationship, like you don't want to go through this relationship hoping that one day things
Yeah.
will embody this idea that you have in your head.
Autopilot. Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
yeah, it's not a healthy way to go about it. Like, I think the best way to go about it, in my opinion, is to focus on how are things in the moment and take that day by day. And obviously not every day is going to be perfect if you're in a relationship, but
Yeah, and you can't love you like you said some interesting things that I want to chime in on. Like you can't love someone else until you love yourself. You know, you gotta be comfortable. Someone wise once told me, you gotta be comfortable. You gotta go to the movies, you gotta enjoy yourself by yourself, you gotta have your time, and it's that you can't, like you said, you can't force these things, because what ends up happening is that that's why initially when you go out with someone, and this is good we're talking about this, because this chimes into the second part of our video, especially now. I think this is a habit a lot of people are having. If you force it and you feel like there's no connection there, it may not ever build that momentum. And when you find someone, they just check your boxes, and you don't think about any of this, and it just hits you like lightning. When you start having to think about what you're saying, and maybe they're not the right person, when you meet the right person, none of that matters, and you never have to think about it. And I think what's also cool too, Keanu Reeves said something really great this year, right before all this happened.
he's
And
the man, bro.
oh, I know, he's the man. He literally, I have this sitting at my desk, is that you can't force something. Whatever's meant to be will be, and whatever's not meant to be will not be. And there's no point in putting all this time and effort in trying to force something, because it's, whether it's relationship, friendship, anything, because it's just going to come crashing and burning, and it's just so exhausting, and it's not worth it. And I'm paraphrasing, but I think
Mhm.
that's really important. And so I've especially learned that even now more than ever, is that like, for me, I don't go for looks. Like, the biggest thing I look for in someone is that they're motivated, that they know what they want, that they just have they have their life where they want to go. Like, that no one's perfect, so I don't expect someone to have their life figured out on day one. I just mean, like, they know what they want. Because, like, here's the thing. You never want to go after looks right away, because that loses its flair eventually. And I think you touched on that. You go for what you see in someone, their true essence behind the exterior, because that's what grows and forms that attraction. And if you're spending time worrying about what you like and what you don't like, then you're missing the entire point. And if you're missing the entire point, then you're just dating the date, and you're not even dating for the right reasons.
Well, okay, so I think I largely agree with what you said, but one thing, like at the end, you said that you're not dating for the right reasons. I think that's subjective. I think people have a multitude of reasons why they want to date, and so to each their own. They get, like, people could do whatever they want. Maybe they're on like a more shallow level where like they're just trying to hook up with somebody, and
Yeah,
that's the reason they're dating. Like, okay, well, if that's your goal, then like maybe like and your actions map to that, then like good for you, you know.
yeah,
um but if you're looking for something of more substance, then I think the way you explained it would be the ideal way, is to focus on what is what is this person doing to better themselves. Like, there's this quote, you brought up Keanu Reeves. Will Smith has this quote, and I don't remember it exactly, but it's like, it's basically like partners should not rely on each other for happiness. There should be two happy individuals who come together and share that happiness and grow together. And if you are in a really good place and you have goals, you have ambitions, and your actions map to that, most likely you're going to find other people who are on a similar level, um, if you're aware of what you're looking for.
Yeah, and I think that's
And
good too because it's the better parts of one whole. And maybe too, what I mean when I said that is that maybe you think you know what you want in the sense of subjectivity. Here's your goal, but then your actions or your execution are to another goal, and maybe you just have to stop and say, okay, well, this is my goal. Maybe my execution needs to match more up to it, and maybe that's where the confusion lies, and maybe that's where you're not looking for the right reason. And I think that's a really good way to sum a lot of this up because another thing that Will Smith said too. Well, see, these guys are so good. They have all these great quotes and everything. He said in the movie Hitch is that life isn't about the amount of breaths you take; it's about how many moments take your breath away. And I think that
ooh,
plays into
mic
this.
drop.
Yeah, it does because it's like it's not about what you're doing. So what you're doing is represented by the amount of breaths you're taking, but what moments come to you or what feels right, that's the moments that take your breath away.
Mm. Yeah, man. It's and those and like we mentioned it earlier in this, but like those moments can't be forced.
No,
They just happen. And it's I think this is a partial reason why people get frustrated with dating is because they try to force it. And they have this idea of they see other people, right, with their perfect partners and their perfect relationships, and that's one downside of social media is that you're seeing everyone's highlight reel. You don't see the argument that maybe this couple got into right before they posted a picture on Instagram, or there's so many unknowns. Like we don't know, right? But we compare ourselves to this fantasy that, and I think it distorts a realistic version of what could be expected in a relationship and when you get into the dating scene. And
yeah. When you get off
it's
the,
unfortunate.
yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you finish. I didn't know you were
That
still
was it. That
talking.
was it.
Okay, okay. I was gonna say that when you get off, and I encourage anybody who's listening to this, check it out. There's a nice, awesome motivational speaker who I love listening to, and he has this system set up where he'll text you every day through community app, and you'll get text quote from him. He has these videos where he puts different scenarios together, and one of the scenarios he has is couple seems like they're great on paper, and so there's this couple that's struggling, but they feel like they're the most authentic. They're struggling with money, they love each other, and that's what matters. And they see these people on Instagram and see that. Oh, hold on 1 second, my mic fell out. The mic fell out. Apologies. Anyway, so they see these couple and they're like, oh, they look so great. Why can't we be like that? But then on the other end, you see them take this photo and then you see the behind the scenes that they're actually fighting, that they don't have all this money like they seem, like the dress that they took a picture, she took a picture and she's going to return. She just did it. So it was
Mm-hmm.
all for show. And the people that weren't that sure how their life was going were actually the better ones. So it's like, don't just look on here. And it's the same with a lot of actors, actresses, people in Hollywood. Everything looks good on paper, but it doesn't mean it is. So don't compare yourself to others or expect to be like others. Be the first, like instead of being the next such and such, be the first you and make what you have
Hey,
special.
yeah, I like that, man. I think it's really important, and this is something that people struggle with is like, don't be the next such and such, like be the first you. I think that is like a main obstacle to achieving that is codependency, because if you're codependent, you're gonna there's varying forms, but like for the sake of simplicity, I think a lot of people when they think of codependency, they think of the partner who's super needy, who is constantly attached to the other person, and if they don't have a partner, they're lost. They have no idea who they are. They're this like the person that's like constantly in relationships, like they can't be alone. And if you can't be alone with your thoughts, with your feelings, because codependency is it's a symptom. It's like what is causing you to engage in codependent behaviors, right? Like what is the underlying root cause? And until you figure that out, you're not fully going to grasp or understand or embody who you are as a person. And that journey to like self-realization, to understanding your own identity, to figuring out what the most authentic, genuine version of you is, there's going to be, and I don't think that's like an end goal. I think that that's something that is constantly worked on throughout life. I don't think there is an actual end goal, but there are going to be obstacles in the way. And a big one, a big obstacle to get in the way of that is codependency, because you're reliant on other people to make you feel whole. And there's this amazing stand-up comedy special. Um, the guy's name is Daniel Sloss, and he's got this episode. It's on Netflix, and the episode is called Jigsaw. And he's basically talking about how he was raised and society largely believes that if you are an adult and you're not married with kids, that you're doing something wrong. And his family, his dad taught him, like, gave him this analogy of a jigsaw puzzle. And in the center piece of the puzzle should be, by society standards, your partner. And if you go through life believing that, then anytime you don't have a partner, you don't feel complete. Like your puzzle is not complete. And until you can understand and get to the point where there isn't just one big piece in the middle of a partner, there should be a lot of intricate moving parts in the middle of this puzzle, and your partner can be one piece of that. And if that partner leaves for whatever reason, you will be okay. But if you
Yeah.
idealize and fantasize this version of a partner that's like this massive centerpiece of your life, when you don't have one or when they're gone, you are incomplete. And I think that that's a dangerous way to live life, because everyone is complete entirely as they are. Each person has value as they are. Each person is perfect as far as being human as they are. And unfortunately, there are a lot of people who don't believe that. And so it's this is why I'm so passionate about this topic, because I didn't believe that for a long time, like the majority of my life. And once I once I kind of like lifted the veil and like stepped through to the other side, I realized how much of an impact that mentality and that belief system had on my life. And being able to recognize the fact that I have value and that I'm complete, purely like as I am right now, sitting in my backyard. Like I'm complete, I'm okay. I am like I'm me and I'm cool with that. That more than anything has changed my entire life.
Yeah. And I think that's something important to take away from this. And I think that's a good way to wrap this up. And I think the moral of that is that you are your own center and everything else is around you is a bonus. And so work on yourself and really be the best you. So that way, when you meet someone, they're not completing a piece of your puzzle, they're giving you an additional piece that you didn't even know you needed. And so I think that's a good way. And I think a good encouraging exercise that I challenge everybody to do, I challenge myself to do, I even challenge you to do it, Nick. You probably
All
already
right.
do it, is that maybe take not a complete break from social media. Obviously, we're working on social media, but so for some of you, take a break from it, put your phones down. Especially now, it's easy to just revert to that because you're inside all the time. But go on a nature walk or Do something that's going to help find yourself. Be happy with yourself and be complete with yourself instead of worrying about what you're missing out by being at home. You can do anything you want on your own. I know a lot of people aren't comfortable going out on their own, but until you feel comfortable, maybe you're not complete. Work on yourself, and I challenge everybody to do that that's listening or that will watch this later and see how you feel. And I think that will really help put you down the right path.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's massively important to take social media detox days and to just go out and like walk to the park. Go like I'm fortunate enough to live in San Diego and the beach is 20 minutes away, so I try to go as often as I can. But even, go out, like instead of sitting in your house, go out, like leave your phone inside and go out in the backyard and sit out there for 15 minutes. Or if you have an apartment, go out and like sit in the grass outside for 15 minutes and just look and recognize how beautiful life is, and and that you don't need all these external things to fill your cup. You have the ability to fill your cup all on your own.
Exactly. And look at us. We spent 35 minutes or so talking to you guys, and we're outside. And, you guys were technically outside virtually, but now we're challenging you to go out there and, see, explore the world. There's just such a great
Yeah.
place out there, But
Yeah,
I think
man.
this is really good. Hopefully, this helped a lot of people, or at least maybe just one, because then our mission is direction.
That's all
I
we
will
need.
end
Just
this. And again, yeah, that's all we need. And so, just to
that's
rehash
all
what
we
we were
need.
saying, where we can follow where we can find each other. For those watching now, you can follow me on here at Farrellism 15 on Facebook and YouTube at Farrellism, and on Apple Podcasts, anywhere that podcasts are. That's where this will be up. And before we end this, Nick, where can people find you?
So if you're on here, you could check the comeback journey on Instagram. It's at underscore the comeback journey. Facebook, YouTube, and TikTok. Just search the comeback journey. And then I have a website, thecomebackjourney.com. My podcast is up on most streaming platforms. Same name, The Comeback Journey. And yeah, I'm my door is always open if anyone ever wants to chat about this kind of stuff. I thoroughly enjoy it. So
Yeah.
yeah, um,
Same here. And my door's
same.
always
Yeah,
open too. Don't be afraid to message us, even if you don't know us. That's why we're here. Make a new friend. Come to someone. Come to us if you can't go to anybody else. We're here for you. We'll lend you our ears. Please share this around and spread this. And I hope you gain something positive out of this. Thank you so much for your time, Nick. And thanks to everyone watching. Stay positive and be you.
be you. That's right.
Be you. Thank
Cool.
you so much, Nick. Really
Yeah,
appreciate
man.
this.
This was a
All right.
blast. We got to do this again soon.
Absolutely. The first of many. Thank you
Yes,
so
sir.
much.
Of course, man. I'll talk to you soon.
All right. Bye.
Bye.